our technical team. Awesome. And we've just been told we're live. Hi, Libby. How are you?
Hey, I'm very well. Thanks for having me this evening.
No, it's a pleasure. A warm welcome to everyone joining us on YouTube and Zoom for tonight's Thursday night talk on Space Tour Live. And to let everybody know who's joining us, is tonight is going to be slightly different from the past few weeks. And of course, this is season two of our live talks every Thursday night. And in fact, tonight is going to be an interview with Libby about her latest book, Space Explorers, which we'll be talking about tonight, which you see right next to me over here. So thank you so much, Libby, for joining us.
Happy to. And it's really exciting to be talking about my book. Not had many opportunities to do that yet. And so this is great fun.
Great. Really, really looking forward to it. We're just going to give everyone a chance to kind of join into if they're joining in the webinar or if they're hopping on to the YouTube live. I can already see quite a few people on the Zoom already. Hi, Claire. Hi, Anna. Hi, Dawn. Thank you for joining us. And a reminder to everyone joining us, if you have any questions for Libby throughout the talk, just drop them in the comments section on the YouTube or drop them in the Q&A on Zoom, and we'll definitely be sure to ask Libby the questions. But yeah, where do we start? First of all, a big congratulations on the launch of Space Explorers. I'm sure, like when you were writing it, you never expected it for it to be released in such a crazy time.
No. And I was writing this. I started writing this in December 2018 and finished it in April 2019.
Wow.
So yeah, even when it's been so long ago that I wrote it. It's quite something. I've learned a lot about how children's publishing works, and it's a long time coming. But even from that, even when we're talking about the date and it coming out, goodness me, I never expected in a million years. I don't think anyone did, of course, that we'd all
Yeah.
be sitting here. But there are actually some silver linings to it, because it means I can do so many more events from, for me, the comfort of my own home. It's really sad that I can't go and meet people. And it's so strange doing these events where you're just talking to a white light in a webcam. And I know you're all out there.
Yeah.
And please do ask lots of questions, because it would be lovely to hear from you. So yeah, I'm sorry we can't meet, but it means I can get to do more things that normally would have required travel. So that's good for the environment, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. It's good for the environment, and we can definitely reach more and more people across the UK who we would never have had a chance to kind of connect with if we were based at Space Store in Didcot. So it's great that if you're tuning in wherever you are in the UK,
Or
I
even
mean,
around
it's a
the world,
sorry.
or even around the world, I guess.
Yeah, even globally, if you're watching this across the world, not sure what time it is wherever you are. Thank you so much for joining us. If you are joining up from the outside, from outside the UK, but it's great that we're able to connect with so many people because of the virtual change in our lifestyles. Um, Now I can see more and more people joining in. Just to remind everyone, if you're actually joining in on the Zoom, one lucky winner is going to get a chance to win a signed copy of Libby's latest book, Space Explorers. So do stay tuned right till the end, where we'll be revealing one lucky winner. I'll put all the names of everyone who's here at the end into my random name generator, and you'll get a signed copy of the book. And as me and Libby were talking just before we came online, because of the digital change, you haven't had a chance to sign many copies. Unfortunately, I think it was about a month ago when you had the chance to visit the space store when the restrictions had kind of eased a little bit, and you had a chance to sign a few copies for us.
Yeah, so it's the only place at the minute. It's a big exclusive for Space Store. They're the only place you can get a signed copy, um, because we're local, relatively speaking, to each other. We're able to sort that out, and when it's all safe and allowed, and I met up with some of the staff and wearing face masks, and everything was wiped down and sanitized and all the rest of it. But there's signed copies there, and we're even able to do some personalized copies. They take a bit longer because we've got to organize that. But yeah, it's the only place you can get signed copies at the moment. So, and thanks to everyone at Space Store for at least getting for doing that, and for allowing people to be able to at least get signed copies remotely, even if we can't meet.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to have your book in store for us and online, of course. But just a reminder to everyone, if you do want to get your hands on the book before we even start tonight's little talk about the book, you can get it from any leading retailer, bookshop, um, across the globe. But if you do want a signed copy, that is of course exclusive to Space Store. So do head over to spacestore.co/books and you'll find it there. Um, and of course, Libby, this is actually your second book, isn't it? After A Galaxy of Her Own,
Yeah,
which people might have come across with.
yes, I've got it here. I could do that one too. This was the first one, and it's where my writing has begun, and it still surprises me actually that this book, A Galaxy of Her Own, became a reality, and I'm even more amazed actually that I've been able to write a second book, and it's especially because it was so long ago that I finished it. It is now so lovely that it's out in the wild. People are telling me what they think of it, and it really was a joy to write, and a joy to be able to share the stories that are in there with the readers. I hope they enjoy them.
Yeah, well, I'm really, really glad that you managed to get on to number two, because a lot of people, they write one and that's it. They get tired of it, but I'm glad you made it to number two. How would you say Space Explorers is different from A Galaxy of Our Own? And I know we spoke back in, I think it was May or June on Space Door Live. We spoke a little bit about A Galaxy of Our Own, and we did the prelude to the launch of this book. Now this one's actually out. But how is this one slightly different?
They're both children's books, and they're both about space exploration, and particularly human space exploration. But Space Explorers is essentially 25 bedtime stories, so it's a bit different. A Galaxy of Her Own was sort of short pen portraits of the women who have played a part throughout history in human exploration. Space Explorers goes a lot more in depth into the true, I mean, this is what's exciting to me, is the true stories of human exploration, right through from the very beginning, Yuri Gagarin going into space, all the way through to what's happening now. And you can read each one on its own. It's a bedtime story. It shares with you something exciting that has happened. But you can also read all of them sort of end to end, one at a time.
Yeah.
And it will take you through the history of space exploration, how we got from those early days of people who've never been on top of rockets before, all the way to today, where we've had nearly 20 years now of humans living and working on the International Space Station. And all of it is completely true, except one story right at the end, where I have imagined what might happen when we finally send humans to Mars. And even that, not happened, but I still like to think of it as it's completely possible.
Yeah, no, I definitely, I've read the book, and the stories, the way they are, even though as an engineer I've worked in the space industry for over a year now, so of course I know and I've come across these stories about Yuri Gagarin and Neil Armstrong and all the famous names, Chris Hadfield, all of these famous names. I know about them, and I've come across them and I know their stories, but the way they're described in the book, in such an adventurous, um, a mystical style, even though it's all true. Actually, there was one extract I wanted to, the first page I wanted to read to everyone tuning in. It's only a couple of sentences, but it says, "These stories are not creations of imagination, no matter how unbelievable they may at first seem. They are all true, told just as they really happened." And that really struck me, because whenever we kind of go on the internet to learn about space or listen to podcasts or read articles, it's such an informative. Just gonna fix the. Um, it's such an it comes across as really informative. And it's sometimes hard to dilute that for young people and children who are interested in space. or for parents who want to kind of get their children interested in space, or if their children have shown an interest in space, to feed that desire and interest. And I think this book does it so brilliantly. And I read children's books at this, because at the Space Store we sell a whole bunch of children's books. But this one came across, it was just such a nice way of delivering such informative stories in a really, really nice style. So hats off to you for doing that.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind and so lovely to hear, because it's what I wanted to do. That there is now, particularly today, I think, not when I was growing up, now you watch films, videos, and there's great fiction, great science fiction, but and you can look at them and go, oh, that's true. And you sort of can do the reverse. You can look at films from the past. And one in particular I've seen, the first IMAX film that was filmed on the space station right back in Expedition 1, that Tom Cruise, I think, narrates. I watched that recently and I went, oh my goodness me, that looks fake. Because the technology in the past was so old. It's got such a short depth of focus. Everything's fuzzy and blurry.
Yeah.
You look at it and think, oh, they're on a green screen, and you get conspiracy theories now about going to the moon and so on. To me, it's so important. It was so important to write that line at the beginning to say this really is true. I haven't made these up, and it's so important to share those with all the young people, because you can almost forget how exciting it is, because space is becoming more and more a part of our everyday lives, and sometimes you can't tell what's real and what's fake anymore in our digital world. It's become so good.
Yeah, no, it's amazing that you're able to convey that truth through a adventurous style for children who are maybe under the age of 10, and it might come across to them as fantasy, but then you're like, no, hold on, this is actually real and this actually happened. And that's amazing. So one of the questions I actually wanted to ask you was, of course, this is 25 different kind of standalone stories. What did you learn about when writing the book? Because of course you must have had to do some research with your vast experience even. What was like, what did you learn about, and what did you find interesting when you were researching these stories?
I had so much fun, and it's always a challenge to go, what do you put in, what don't you put in, what are the big stories? There's the Apollo 11 moon landings in there, there's Apollo 13 in there, the big ones. But then there are also lesser known stories that I've known from my past. Things like the leak, the air leak, the depressurization that happened on Mir. When so Mir was the first big space station by the Soviet Union, the country that was originally what is now Russia and lots of other countries. It was a collection of those. Explain that in the book. So the Mir space station was the first big space station, and there was a cargo vehicle that ended up crashing into it, and the crew nearly had to evacuate. And Mike Foale, who is one of the British astronauts who is not a British astronaut because he flew with an American flag on his arm. He was born in Britain, but moved to the States and became an American NASA astronaut. I mean, he was on board. And that story is in there. And that was one of those stories that I know about and knew about and wanted to include. But it was so much fun going back, reading the reports at the time, reading the books that had been written about it, and just actually, for me, learning more of the details. And then I had to do fun things like listen to the mission transcripts of the Apollo 11 moon. Because I really did want to capture exactly what was said. And there are so many great resources out there. It's the beauty of all the space missions is that at least the early ones, you can find everything that's been said and written down. Excuse me. It's not a dry cough. It's not a new dry cough.
I was not going to say anything.
No. You can't cough in this day and age. Anyway, yes. So it was great fun listening to the old recordings. And then I dug into other books. There were stories, little bits I knew about. I chatted to people I know and said, what are those other great hidden stories? There's a really fun one in the book, which is all about spies and espionage and the sort of tale of spy satellites. And that's come from a book that I had read. And I have to be very honest, this is you can see behind me, I got shelves and shelves of
Yeah.
books of all the stories over the years, and that's where I start from, is what's in there. And there's a tale in one of those about the first space shuttle launch, and how allegedly and apparently, and I have to, the legal people from the book made sure I used all of that, because it's still sort of not all fully been declassified, and there's still a lot of perhaps, but allegedly the US had a secret plan to use their spy satellites to look at the belly, the underside of the first space shuttle launch, because of course the space shuttle are covered in tiles, these
Yeah.
heat shields, which was what tragically failed in the Columbia accident. But way back in the first mission, the very first space shuttle mission, turns out they were worried about that same thing, and apparently, allegedly, they used their spy satellites to take a photograph. And that, I knew little bits of, but learning more about that, bringing that together, being able to tell that story, which I don't think many people know about at all, was loads of fun. So there's all sorts of different things in the book, from what you expect to be there to hopefully some stuff that people haven't read about before.
Yeah, definitely. I've definitely learned, even though it's a children's book, and being like even reading it now, I still learned so much, and it was lovely to read. And some things were surprising, and the way as you said, like the things that, for example, what Yuri Gagarin said when he was going up. Like you don't come across that, and you always think, when you think back to these major milestones for space history, you always think you know it. Oh yeah, you know that Neil Armstrong went to the moon. You know Yuri Gagarin was the first guy in space from Russia, and you think you know, until you read about it and you're like, no way, this happened and this happened. And I'll definitely urge even adults who are watching this to have a go at this one, because it is really really interesting. And if I was a parent reading to my child at night, I'd definitely read on after my child had fallen asleep. It's that interesting. Um, but yeah, it's great. It's great. Moving on, so, of course, in terms of your professional background, you have been a flight director, and you've done, like, you've got vast experience in the space industry. How do you think, like, your professional background, with having a vast experience in the space industry, knowing so much, being involved with Tim Peake, of course, um, how do you think that professional background has influenced your style in writing the book? Because of course you constantly, I'd have to constantly remind myself, if I was writing a book, that okay, this is for kids, they don't know anything, whereas I might do, or I may do. So where do you find that balance of, do where do you expect, what do you expect kids to know, and how much information you can possibly feed them?
It was a really interesting discussion at times with my editor, and it's why you have an editor in this, is to help you through that process.
Yeah.
Actually, you ask about what had my professional career helped me with this, and it's not so much the space part of it, because this has been a lifelong passion. This library behind me that you see, I've been reading those books since I could read. This is
Yeah.
why this book actually to me is so exciting, because it's sharing all these stories I've learned in my life. But and actually, funny, this day and age, I work so much in it, I read much less, because I'm working in it all day. The bit that has really helped me was that the way I got into mission control was that my first job working there was as an instructor. And I was taught how to teach people the tools and the systems, the things they needed to know to go and work in mission control.
Yeah.
And I think that has been invaluable to me in helping me learn how to be a better communicator, how to think about my audience. And certainly when I've been writing this, for me, I find the easiest way to communicate is through talking. And I would often have to sort of sit down and imagine, and sometimes actually talk to my nieces and my nephews, and tell them the story out loud, because then it would unblock what I needed to write down. And I would
Yeah.
certainly read it out loud as I was writing, imagining what it's like when you are saying these words out loud, reading them as a bedtime story,
Yeah.
the excitement that you would bring into it. That was all part of it. And I think for me, the secret is just to remember that your audience, they don't know anything. It's not that they don't know anything, they know things. But you have to sort of remember that they don't know everything and explain things. One of the biggest things, and was where my editor was very helpful, was indeed with the Soviet Union. And I would just write, there was that Yuri Gagarin was a cosmonaut from the Soviet Union. And she'd go, you have to explain what a cosmonaut is, and you have to explain what the Soviet Union is, because children don't know this.
Yeah.
Indeed, one of my earliest reviews was from one of my nephews. And apparently him and my sister got into a whole discussion about what the Soviet Union was and the downfall of communism and all kinds of things. It led to loads of other great discussions. And that's what the editor's there for. But I do like to sort of expect something of my readers, because I think if you expect nothing, you end up with a book that's too simple. And I have great belief that everybody, if they're interested and inquisitive, will go and find things out and can go and learn. And that's part of the beauty and the nature of reading. And so there's a balance to be struck. But yeah, I would include words that, that we had lots of discussions about words I wanted to include and would they be known by young readers or not. And sometimes I won the argument and said, no, but we should include this because it means the right thing and they can go and learn. And sometimes my editor won quite rightly, because that's how you produce a book and how you get something that's right for the audience.
Yeah, of course, because so much of that would be based on your judgment and the young people you spend time with, and you don't know where your book is going to go. But of course, I mean, it's great that you've had a good team behind you, and I can definitely say Leonard Dupont, if I hopefully pronounced that correctly, he's done an amazing job with the illustrations in there. So a credit to your team, credit to your entire team who has produced the book. It is.
Thank you. They've all been brilliant, and Leonard's illustrations are gorgeous. I can take no credit for those.
Yeah.
What we did work together on, and another reason for me I'm so proud of this book, is that we found the balance between artistic license and staying true to it. It was so important to me in this book that it was truthful, that we didn't bend the rules, we didn't base it on anything. And in art, of course, that's a challenge, because you can't just reproduce photographs, and sometimes Leonard is imagining scenes that we don't have full records of, and the art is there. But we did things, for example, that there's an illustration, I can probably even find it, that there's a beautiful illustration he's done of Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on the surface of the moon. If I can hold this up, this one. And when I originally saw it, I saw all the images. When I originally saw it, the shadows just didn't look right to me, and they were out of proportion between the lunar module and the astronauts. And we weren't going as far as going what was going to be the right sun angle at that point. It was a step too far, but I wanted the relative sizes to be correct.
That needs to be correct, yeah.
And so we got that level of detail in there. And I hope that what it brings together is not that people are going to look at those shadows and go, oh, they're right, but just that as a whole the book feels truthful and real, and
real,
not something that people who know the world of space exploration will look at and pick holes in. And this is not an invitation for everybody to pick holes in it, please don't, but you shouldn't find things that are really glaringly obviously wrong. It's truthful and real, and really a work of non-fiction. It's not fiction at all.
Yeah, no, it's great. I think credit to your entire team again. Like some of the illustrations in there, it's an amazing way of looking at these historical fates. I won't go too much into it because I'll be ruining it, but it is definitely really, 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 really nice to see. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but it's got 25 space explorer stories in there. How did you kind of pick out these stories? And what, of course, there must have been more that you had to kind of cut down. I was like, okay, no, I have to sacrifice this one. So how did you kind of how did you do that?
There was lots of discussion, and as the book evolved, I wanted there to really be an arc right from to take you right the way through the history. That was for me what I was fascinated with growing up, and I wanted people to understand a little bit, young people, that space we see today came
Yeah.
out of the Second World War. Really, it was a point that some people try and forget about, but it's no, that's where it came from, and it should be understood. So that's right there in the first story. But as well as doing that, I wanted to present the world of the space industry for how it is today, actually, which is a diverse place, open to everybody. And it's one of the challenges when you are writing stories that are historical. Big, you say, right, I've got to have Apollo 8 and Apollo 13 and so on, and some of the big stories, you can suddenly find yourself with 25 stories and go, they're all men.
Yeah.
And with great apology to those great stories that were there, I had to make sure that we had a balance and brought some others in. So I'm trying to think of what didn't make the cut now, but you could have gone on for ages with some of the early day stories, and there had to be a balance of coming up to the stories.
Maybe save those for the next one.
Oh, let's see what happens. That would be lovely.
Great. No, we that's great. And the fact that I know we spoke about this offline before we earlier, that you really wanted to acknowledge people who kind of are not alive anymore, and they have contributed so much to this to space in general. And I think credit to you for doing that, because a lot of the time we it's something we don't generally come across all the time.
It's so there is a story in there that's acknowledging the loss of all the people who have died going into space, part of space exploration, and it's back to the truth. I wanted to acknowledge that it came from the Second World War. I wanted to acknowledge that we don't always manage to get this right, and even though it's a children's book, that's something that we can talk about and should understand, and so that is in there in a way that I hope is respectful and explains that it is a risky business, and the people who are getting on top of the rockets understand that.
Yeah.
And when the worst things happen, because they do, and they will again, despite everybody's best efforts, that we learn from those mistakes, and that we carry on, and we honor their memories and the sacrifices they made by learning and carrying on and not giving up, actually. So yeah, that's in there. I'm trying to think of some of the other things we should highlight. There were so many fun things. I really wanted to make sure that the different people that play their parts are reflected in there. So there's a great story that I really enjoy about what happened when Sonny Williams and Aki Hoshida, American and Japanese astronauts, were out on a spacewalk. They were fixing a part of the space station. It's called the MBSU, the main bus switching unit.
Yeah.
But this spacewalk to replace this box ran into all kinds of problems because there was a pesky bolt that wouldn't come out.
Yeah.
And in the end, and the story is in there of how this got solved, is the team on the ground who have to solve these problems and fixed it with a toothbrush. And so I love that story. And I actually, for what it happens and the teams that were there. But there's also a great ending to it. And all I'll say is that everybody's got a space tool in their house today. And you wouldn't know it, but you really do.
Yeah, I'm sure we do. Um, That's great. Just a reminder to everyone who's tuning in tonight, whether you're watching us on YouTube or you're watching us on Zoom, please do send in your thoughts and questions if you have any for Libby. I'm sure she'll be happy to answer them before tonight, before tonight's over. I had a question for you actually. Is have you always wanted to be a writer? I know you said you read growing up. You read a lot of books, and I can see a massive bookshelf behind you. But have you always wanted to be a writer?
It was a surprise to me, and that is the way that my life has gone, and that here I am doing it. But it goes to show you, it goes to show you that you never know what's around the corner, and the reason this has happened, and the reason it is, and I'm enjoying it so much, and people seem to think that the writing is fun to read too, which is very flattering and very lovely to hear. Um, I always people ask me, what advice do you have? And one of the bits of advice I always have is seize the opportunities when they come along. And that was what happened. Like life presented me with an opportunity to do this, and I took it and I did it, and here we are. So it was not something I expected growing up, but it is something that has come about because it turns out I enjoy communicating and talking to people and sharing stories of space. And the natural progression into that is then to write about it, actually. So it was not something I expected to happen, but now it's happened. I go, oh, well, yeah, of course it was going to happen in some ways, and it's really lovely that I get to do it. It's really an honor that I get to share something that I find so exciting with everybody. It's great.
No, that's really, really great to see. So how did you kind of manage your time, of course, having a full-time role? How did you manage to write not one but two books over the past couple of years?
Oh, with a lot of support from my friends and family, and with lots of evenings and weekends. It was nothing other than hard graft. Um, and that it was something I was passionate about and enjoyed doing. And another piece of advice, I think it's true in life, you find things you enjoy. It's not a job in the same way. And so it was a project I enjoyed. These stories are ones that I have always enjoyed reading, and to go and to be able to share them with today's young audience, who I don't think are so connected with the early stories. When I was growing up, when I was the age that I hope the readers of this book are, it was the late 80s and early 90s, and I read all these stories of the early days of the space race, of the Mercury, Apollo, and Gemini missions, and the Apollo moon landings, and they seemed like ancient history to me. And it now amazes me actually how close it was when I was young, because I was born 9 years after the last moon landing, and of course there was then the Apollo Soyuz test project a few years later. So it really wasn't ancient history at all. It was still quite recent in the memories of people. And I was born just as the space shuttle era began. It's really lovely to me now to take those things that I sort of realized through time, as time has gone on, that they are more in the distant past. But the stories are fantastic, and it's amazing what people were doing then. It's amazing what people are doing now. And so, it was not a chore to distill that down and to share them with stories for young people.
That's really, really good to hear, and that genuinely does come across when you read the book. The excitement is definitely shared through the words. So you've done a great job. And what we were talking about actually leads into a couple of questions from our audience I'm seeing just coming in. And Anna is asking, what is your favorite story then, Libby?
Oh, hello, Anna. That's like asking me to choose, my favorite child or my favorite niece or nephew or something like that. There are so many, but I think one I will pick out is the story of Sally and Svetlana. Sally Ride was the first American woman in space.
Yeah.
Svetlana was the first woman to do a spacewalk. She beat Sally Ride into space by just a few months, because the rivalry in the 1980s had not gone away, and the Soviet Union was still trying to beat America. But Sally and Svetlana, say from the Soviet Union, both of them were part of selections that then led to them having ridiculous media pressure and media questioning, because they were female, because they were women, and flying into space. And they got crazy treatment that the men weren't getting just because they were female, and they were being asked questions that the men would never be being asked. And they said they had very similar experiences on sort of opposite sides of the space race. And they met once, and just once in their life. And the story of their meeting is in the book. And it reads, it's something like out of a James Bond novel. And there's diplomatic tensions. America and Soviet Union aren't talking to each other. Well, I won't tell the whole story now, but there was black cars racing through the back streets of Budapest in the pouring rain, and ultimately Sally and Svetlana were able to spend just one evening together exchanging stories of their experiences, and they were really two people in the world who could only almost relate to each other. And anyway, at that point, nobody else had gone through the same things that they had gone through. And it was really lovely to know that they had met, and that's, I think, one of those stories that isn't so well known. And it's mentioned a little bit in Sally Ride's biography, and then there's a few other bits and pieces out there that I was able to research and bring it all together. So that's one of my favorite stories, but there are lots in the book.
And it's great you mentioned that, because if I know this talk is going to go on YouTube for everyone to catch up if you missed it, and I think our editing team might be able to plug in our talk we had back in May or June, which was all about women in space, and you did go into the details of all these conversations. So I'm just going to point over here or here over here, and then our editing team can put a little link, and you can go watch that talk later on. Another question, which links to, of course, this whole book revolves around space exploring stories, is, and this one's come from YouTube. What stories do you think we might be writing about or reading about in 25 to 50 years' time?
Oh, that's a lovely question. And I think there's a really easy answer to that. It's definitely going to be the second era, the second chapter of moon landings. They're happening. And within 25 years, we're going to get there. If Trump has his way, we're going to see people on the moon in the next 3.5 years, which is crazy to my mind. But we're certainly going that way. And 2024 is perhaps optimistic, but we are building the hardware that's going to go there. We are signing contracts to build parts of the Lunar Gateway, which is going to be the small, compared to the International Space Station, tiny studio flak that's going to orbit out near the moon to allow astronauts from around the world, excitingly, one day to go back to the moon. And so those stories will be there. And I can't believe we're actually going to see it. Having grown up reading about the first moon landings and thinking they were distant history, because I missed them by a few years, to then see them and hopefully be a part of them in some way, shape or form in the industry, it excites me. Never mind the rest of the world. And so I will be writing about those, I hope, one day. And then if you're really looking 50 years into the future, we will, I think, be talking about humans to Mars within that time frame. And humans going to Mars has always been 30 years away. We finished the moon landings in 1972 when people were talking about how we'd be on Mars by 2000. And in 2000, we were talking that by now, or in a few years' time, we would be there. And that horizon for Mars has kept going, sort of, just moving further and further into the future. But with us moving towards the moon, and still with what we're discovering on Mars, and that's clearly it's always stated as the space agencies as the horizon goal. I think we might see that. I caveat all of that with the fact that we are living in crazy, times that are completely unprecedented, and absolutely the world's got many challenges to deal with. And I can totally see that in another year we'll be looking at this and go, space exploration, I haven't got time for that. We're too busy dealing with whatever else it is. So I'm not making any predictions I'd be held to or look in the crystal ball. But as things stand today, I think we will see those things happen. And I hope we do, because it will inspire so many more people. When we put things into space, we put humans into space, it costs money. They're not cheap programs, but we don't put all that money in a pile and burn it. It's been the work of hundreds of thousands of people through over the years, and any one time, thousands of people around the world working, making it happen. We get great technology from it. We get great science, and we get inspiration, and we get to write books like this one that will then lead to people seeing how science and technology can be exciting. And with the world we live in, where everything is dependent on technology, That's a really important thing to me, that people understand that and are excited by it too.
Great. Now, that all being said, do you have a new series planned, or
Do I have a new series planned?
yeah, as in after Space Explorers,
Ah,
is there another kind of book or series planned?
I understand. There are things cogitating in my head, and when the time is right, they'll come out. I think the whole world at the minute's dealing with um, changing priorities and adjusting to the new way of living. And but I hope actually when things settle down, there will be things I'd love to do. I would love to write about the way that space does impact all of our everyday lives, and open children's eyes to that. From things like weather forecasting to our maps and the technology that we all depend on and don't give a second thought to, and shine a light on some of that. We'll see what happens. That's one of the ideas I have in my head.
That's a great ambition there. It's good to see that we're not stopping here. Just a reminder to everyone, I'm going to give everyone last chance to kind of let me know if you have any questions for Libby, because we are nearing the end of our webinar. But yeah, once again, thank you so much for taking the time out to be with us tonight. I've definitely enjoyed learning more about the book, like speaking to you about it, and I'm sure everyone who's tuned in has loved it. Now it is time to pick one of our audience for the prize. We've got a few people left on the Zoom webinar, so I'm going to chuck all these names into a random name generator. I think there's a question, but
if there's another question, I can answer that while you're doing your magic with the random name generator.
This question's come from Annabelle. She's asking, if you could travel to explore another planet, which one would it be and why? And whilst you're answering that question, I'm going to chuck all these names in the random name generator.
All right, Annabelle, that's a lovely question too. And where would I go and why? Oh, of all the planets, I'd go to Mars. Mostly because I think it's of all of them the one that is likely to be most hospitable, most live on it the best. Back when I was young, I had to write a travel guide for somewhere I wanted to go one day, and I wrote one to go to Mars, and I'd written about how we terraformed it and put hotels on it, and possibly the things that Elon Musk and people are thinking about doing now. These days, I don't think I want to go to a terraformed Mars. I don't want it to be changed, but it feels like the one that would be most similar to Earth, which is why it's so exciting to go and visit, because there might be life there. And it's not too far away. Venus is exciting and fascinating with the sort of stories that we've found recently of phosphine, of which there's possible evidence that there might be something certainly there that we wouldn't expect to see, and maybe one of the explanations might be microbes, and there's lots there. But I think it's pretty hot, and Mercury's pretty dry, and you go out to the gas giants like Jupiter and Saturn, and you just plunge into them. So I'd stick to Mars.
I think that's a good choice. Yeah, thank you, Annabelle. What a lovely question. Now I have just put the names into the random name generator, and our winner for tonight's giveaway for Libby's latest book, Space Explorers, is Daniel Campbell. So congratulations, Daniel. Thanks for tuning in tonight. Our team will be in touch with you via email to get you your signed copy of Space Explorers. Once again, thank you for tuning in tonight. Thank you, Libby, for an amazing talk. It's been a pleasure talking to you about your latest book and how we got here. And thanks for everyone who's tuned in. Though don't go away just yet. At Space Store, we love exploring space with you, and over the past several months, we've been working to bring space virtually to you with Space Store Live. And now we really want to hear about what you've enjoyed and how we might improve this in the future. So we're giving you a chance to have your say. So please follow the link in the description below this video. and help us bring space to everyone, everywhere, every day. If you're on YouTube, it'll be underneath in the comments below. You'll see the link. It will only take a minute for you to answer, and it will really, really help us, our team at Space Still Live, to improve our service to bringing you space all the time. So please do go and fill that out when you get a moment, and we'll really, really appreciate it. Once again, it's been a pleasure having you, Libby. Thank you so much for your time. And if you haven't already got your hands on Space Explorers, head over to spacestore.co/books, and you'll see it there right at the top.
Thanks so much for having me, and thanks everyone for tuning in. It's been a delight to answer your questions. I hope you really enjoy the book, and you follow me on social media too, and let me know what you think. I'd be love to hear. Thank you.
Awesome. Have a good evening, everyone, and we'll catch you next week for another Thursday night Space Store Live talk at 5:30.